Well, I'm Hamish Bunker. I'm the operations manager here at Portell Maltings. The malting process, I'll describe the malting process to you. The reason that we do malt is inside the barley seed there is a lot of starch. This starch is insoluble as it comes off the field, so the malting process is actually to break down protein in some gummy cell walls and make the starch available and soluble for the distillation process. The first part of the process is the steeping process. There are basically three items to malting. First one is steeping, second one is germination, and the third one is kilning. What I'm going to do just now is tell you about the steeping process, which is the first part of the process. Let me just say that first of all, barley comes off the field at approximately 18 to 20% moisture. It is dried down to about 12% moisture, and that way it's very stable and it will keep for quite a long time, a very long time actually, because it's in the right conditions, cool, dry conditions, it will keep for years. So what we're trying to do now in the steeping process, we add it to water and that initiates the growth. What we're doing in actual fact is just imitating what nature does. If we were to sow the barley in a field, give it some water, it would start to grow. So this is exactly what we're doing with steeping. The steeping process is probably the most critical process. If we get the steeping right, everything else will work fine. So what I can show you what we're trying to achieve here is evenness of growth. Now these barley seeds, you can just see a little chit, C-H-I-T, and we're looking for that to be even across every single barley seed. We don't want it to rush ahead, so we want them all even, and just all evenness of growth is the main thing here. So after we've initiated the growth and we put it down to the next stage, which is germination.
The 7 tonnes you see on this side here is just freshly steeped, laid out, moisture content 44% roughly. On the far side we've got what we would call, it's on the floor 6 days, it's green malt at this stage. Moisture content still up around 40, but that's been continually turned over every 4 hours to avoid this happening. Because if we just left this bed lying on the floor for the next 6 days, we would have a nice green carpet, because the acrospires would feed in all the starch that it's accessed in the corn and grow as barley again. And that is what we don't want. That is what you call a shot grain in this business. What it means is it's barley grown again. You see the rootlets, and the acrospire has taken out all the starch. Now that grain of barley would be of no use to us because all the energy has gone into the stalk.
Okay, so this is the next part of the malting process is the germination. In the steeping, we had 2 days steeping. The next part is to continue the germination process. So we do that by dropping the steeps down into this drum. What we have here is the drum. It's a rather large vessel, so at Portell we're putting 51 tonnes of barley that's been hydrated up, so it's almost 75 tonnes of green malt at this stage. And it sits on top of a perforated floor. And the idea is that for 4.5 days, we'll let that germinate. We blow air up through it to help it grow, and we hydrate the air with some moisture with water being blown up through it for 100 hours, and that's just to continue the growth. So the steeping process was to initiate the growth. The germination process is to just continue that for 4.5 days. Now what we're actually trying to do in here, inside the little barley seed, are little packets of starch, and they're bound up by gummy cell walls and protein. The germination process releases enzymes which come out of the seed and break down the gummy cell walls and the protein and leave the starch in a soluble condition for changing to sugar in the mashing process. The test when the barley seed is ready to go for kilning is it should rub out between your fingers. So the characteristics of this seed is that it's nice and chalky, it's got little rootlets growing, and if you peel back the back of the seed, you'll see the acrospire beginning to grow, and the acrospire should be 2/3 to 3/4 the way along the seed. So it's ready to go. So we've done the 2 days steeping, 4.5 days germination, and then the final process is the kilning. So malting is a 7-day process, and we're well through it after germination.
So we're standing here in the kiln passageway at Portell and Maltings. What you see behind me is one of the peat fires. It's the fire in kiln 2, and that kiln's just started its batch. The guys here are real masters at making the fire keep going just. It's different from how it is in your house. We don't want lots of flame, we just want lots of smoke that you see behind me. It's that smoke that gives the malt its flavour, and it's the flavour on the malt that flows through to the glass after the distiller's done his bit. One of the problems we have though is we don't know from the section of peat moss that you dig up just how smoky that particular batch is going to be. So what we do is when we dry each batch, we then strip the kiln and we take a sample of the malt and we analyse that malt to see how smoky that batch has been. And based on how smoky the batch has been, we'll then blend together different batches of malt to match the customer specification. So if we're thinking about our own distilleries of Killala and Lagavulin, we're looking for a phenol specification of between 30 and 40 parts per million. But for some of our other customers on the island, we're maybe looking at slightly higher levels, so perhaps 35 to 45, or for some of the customers, 45 and above. And depending on how smoky they want their malt, it can influence how smoky their spirit is at the end of their distillation process.
Now the last stage, the kilning phase, is the bit that makes Laphroaig really, really different. What happens at this point is we'll peat first and then we'll dry. No other distillery in the industry does this, and it's a bit that kind of makes us unique and gives us two different flavour profiles compared to every other distillery. And kind of any commercial maltings will produce it with peating and drying at the same time. Why do we do this? It's less efficient. It's mainly for these flavours, and it's kind of cresols and glycols that we get extra in the smoke flavoured compounds that give us Laphroaig the kind of really medicinal tarry flavours that are synonymous with Laphroaig. Okay, so this is our kiln 5, and as you can see, this is just the start of the process. We basically light the peat fire below the kiln bed that you've seen loaded earlier on. It's not hot at all. Maximum kind of 25 Celsius. You can see the nice kind of blue peaty smoke. That's exactly what we're after at this point. We'll do it for about 17 hours to give us the flavour profile we're looking for. And oh, if you could smell my hand just now, you get a real infusion of kind of peat flavours. Now, there's two types of peat that we'll use that we'll cut. This is the first peat here, and this is the second peat. So first peat here, not decayed as much, so more of the kind of grassy roots and fungus is showing that we've kind of talked about. So more of these kind of sphagnum mosses, a lot more moisture in the first peat as well. So this helps keep the fire going. Second peat here, you can see it's much more kind of solid, more coal-like, because it's further down, it's just decayed more. So this one will keep our fire going, and this one will give us the kind of flavour we want. And the mix, along with the dust, putting out these flames, helps give us more of that kind of lovely peaty blue smoke.
I'm in the basement of the kiln, and of course the heat source to dry that barley that's above us. And for this we're using anthracite, which is a very old coal. It's a very high carbon content coal, so when you burn it, it doesn't give off any smoke.